But let's talk about the death penalty. Obviously, the debate is kind of raging after the Southport horror, and when we learned last week of the just horrific details of what went on in that dance hall, in the dance class. 3 little girls, stabbed to death by that monster. So a lot of people just saying, well, what really is the point of keeping that guy in prison for more than half a century? Where does that get us? Might it not actually even be more humane to put him out of his misery and indeed put him out of our misery? But certainly a poll in the Times, or revealed by the Times, has revealed that now quite a substantial majority of Brits would favour a return of the death penalty in exceptional circumstances. And interestingly, Isabel, the biggest number of people who favour that death penalty return are young people, millennials. Now, my point about this is, I know we discussed it last week, and you're against the death penalty. I'm sort of on the fence, but I think I'm being persuaded. Why not? But my feeling is that the Westminster Bubble Gang have known for years, that the decades, that the majority of the British public would like a death penalty in exceptional circumstances, and yet our MPs, most of them former local councillors, take it upon themselves to protect the Neanderthal public from our baser instincts. And I think why don't the people who represent us in Parliament listen to us and act on it? Why do they just stick their fingers in their ears and never listen to the people of this country about the death penalty?
Well, I think it's a legitimate debate to have as to whether there is a case for the return of the death penalty for child killers. I hate the death penalty. I abhor it. I hate all the kind of machinery and paraphernalia that goes with it, the whole industry around it. It makes me feel sick. But I am conflicted a little when it comes to monsters like Rudakubana and the parents of that poor little girl, Sarah Sharif, and there have been many others, haven't there, unfortunately. And I do wonder whether it might be a deterrent, at least in some cases. I don't know. I've never thought anyone who abuses or harms children is rational about it and does it because they don't think they're going to get caught, except in the case of grooming gangs. But when it comes to murders, I'm not sure these people are in their right minds. But I don't think that there should be a kind of, I don't know, a blackout on having that discussion. Why can't parliamentarians debate it? And I don't think it's a party political thing. I think it's a bit like, in a very
I agree with that. It's not really...
It's a bit like euthanasia. People have different views, not along party lines on this. It's a matter of conscience.
Let me suggest this to you. I've had a lot of calls, obviously, ever since last week about the death penalty, and people saying, yeah, bring back the rope, make him swing and all this kind of stuff. Well, as I say, I think, bearing in mind Southport and other horrors, child killers, people like that, maybe even some of those grooming gang people who are raping vulnerable underage girls, that kind of thing. Why does the death penalty have to involve theatre? The gallows and the noose are theatre. The electric chair is theatre. It's as if we must not only execute them, people, we must make a show of it. Well, why don't we, if we take somebody like that monster in Southport, and we decide, what's the point of keeping him alive for half a century? Why don't we just put them to death in the way we put down dogs, give them an injection and they peacefully pass away? We don't have to make it into a grisly spectacle. Why don't we do it like that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And I think it is the theatre that repels me as much as the actuality of it. The theatre is grotesque.
I don't like that either. I agree with you.
We still see it in other countries. And, sometimes you read reports of executions in America. And I always sort of try not to read them, but somehow feel drawn to them and then hate myself for looking at them.
What was their last meal? That's what I always want to read.
It's sick, isn't it? It's really sick. I don't want to have anything to do with it, and by reading it, you're participating in some way.
Yeah.
So yeah, could it just be done quietly? Yeah. Well, people would say, well, how would we know what was really happening?
I mean, for example, when they use the lethal injection in America, as some states do, I can't remember the name of it, it's hydrochloride something, but this injection is sort of put in via a catheter or something, and it's a very painful, long process, and you see them apparently spasming and, you know, some foam coming out of their mouths and stuff like that. Well, we don't need to do it with that chemical. As I say, I think I told you last week, one of the saddest things I've done quite a few times now, about 4 or 5 times in my life, I've had to take my beloved dogs down to the vet to put them down, and it's very, very sad, makes you cry, but it's a very peaceful process. They just drift away calmly. Why can't we do that to the people that we feel deserve execution? We don't have to indulge in the spectacle, do we?
I don't know the answer. I don't think there can be a good answer, because after all, everything that I've read about the way people die if they choose to take their own life, you know, for example, at the Swiss clinic Dignitas, doesn't involve any foaming at the mouth or any other theatrics. But, you know, even talking about this is making me feel queasy. I hate it. You know, I know, even though I felt conflicted, and I'm sure many of our listeners are having the same kind of wrestling with their own mind about this. I know from the way I feel just talking about this, literally feeling a bit sick, that I want nothing to do with it.
You're viscerally against it, yeah.
I think what this really touches on is the desperation of so many of us to feel that this can never happen again, and what can we do to kind of end the scourge of this appalling child abuse in our country. And you mentioned about the grooming gangs, and, you know, them too. I'm not sure it's any better to ritually rape and abuse little girls over long periods of years than it is to stab them to death in an afternoon.
Do you think there's something incongruous about what looks now to be an increasing majority of MPs who are in favour of assisted dying? So they're in favour of that, but the majority of MPs would definitely be against the death penalty. Something incongruous about that, isn't there?
I agree that, again, it just comes back to, can't we talk about this openly, even if it's to decide this is not what we are and not what we're going to do? You know, people up and down the country feel the need for some kind of conversation about this. I knew they would. That's why you and I discussed it just a little under a week ago. I said to you at the time, people are going to want to talk about this. And they do, and it's because we just can't fathom how we can keep someone like Rudakubana in our midst, and that's even within a prison setting. Why? What's the point of him?
Absolutely. I mean, as we also discussed last week, I think the entire nation can take some solace in the fact that I would predict that Mr. Rudakubana's time behind bars will not be pleasant. Put it that way. Prison justice is coming his way. But again, you know, we know he's going to get that crap beaten out of him day in, day out. It's going to be dreadful for him. I don't care, don't get me wrong. Again, I mean, maybe it would be more humane to just put him out of his misery.
Well, maybe people should be given the choice. Maybe they could opt for it. I don't know. Whatever we're doing, it isn't working, is it? There's far too many absolutely hideous cases of child murder and child abuse in our country. And people are yearning for something, anything that reduces the number of victims. Something's going terribly, terribly wrong in our country, that we have so many cases of this kind. It
really, really is. You're absolutely right, Isabel. Well, listen, thank you for a typically absorbing hour, and you'll be back tomorrow night for another 60 sizzling minutes. That's Isabel Oakeshott Talks, a fabulous international editor.